visit Bible Museum at Washington, D.C. The Bible Museum, they third floor, they they tell the Bible story as a whole. Among them, they talk about the book of Ruth a lot, actually. And I was very surprised. We just tend to look at the book of Ruth just slightly, not significant, but actually the book of Ruth is a very important book in the Bible, entire Bible. So it's how the King David was born. King David was a shadow of the Messiah. Then it's a story how King David was born. That's the book of Ruth tell us. So that's why this book is so important. So we need to understand what this book is. Okay? Now is why did in chapter 3, okay, first you look at the 3, 7, and 8. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking, was in good spirits. He went over to lie down at the far end of the green pile. Then Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there is a woman lying at his feet. So there's maybe he was surprised. So at his feet, after that exclamation mark. She was so surprised. At the middle of the night, when he was up, there's a woman is there. Wow! But he was not upset. Rather, he asked, who are you? Then, who are you? Then Ruth said, I'm your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garments over me, since you are the guardian redeemer of our family. Then immediately the Boaz replied, the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger man, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, and then don't be afraid. So here, verse 3:10, why did Boaz regard Ruth's act as a greater kindness? You can answer. Jonathan, Joe. Okay.
So I think Ruth's act was kind to multiple people. So I think.
The microphone.
Okay. So Ruth's act was kind to multiple people. So for Naomi, by Ruth trying to get married to Boaz, it provides stability and kind of more stability for Naomi. And so in that way, Ruth sacrificed her own maybe selfish desires to find a younger man, or whether rich or poor, as Boaz says. And so she made the sacrifice for Naomi, or like giving up her life, essentially. And then for Boaz, I know that according to Deuteronomy, so the guardian redeemer has an obligation to take care of the widow of the family. And if they don't, the widow has a right to take it to the public and kind of confront the man in public. And if they refuse, I think it says something like she can spit in their face and take off their shoe. So here, Ruth does it privately and makes it a private matter between the two of them, showing respect and a relationship to Boaz. So it shows that Ruth is very kind and thoughtful of this process. Or, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Who's another person? Sam John, can you add?
I think I told almost the same thing. There's that part that Ruth isn't Israelite. Yeah, she is Moabite. From that, she could act like a Moabite and marry with another person normal, but she acted as Israelite would be. She acted according to the Israelites' law. That will be married, they will be in the nest, and the parents to have the same line. In the name wouldn't be erased. So it could be something like a kindness to his husband who died. Another thing I could think it was about how Ruth only uncovered the food and that will mean that she didn't want anything bad to him. So this means that she was only proposing something like a protection and to be redeemed from him, but she didn't want anything bad to him. So this uncovering food and lying will be showing that she doesn't want anything bad to him.
Okay. Okay, anyway, thank you. Everyone has a different point. That's good. We can learn something from that. Very good. So let me show. Maybe I need to revise this based on your comments. So I learned a lot from you, both of you. Okay. The word kindness means already we mentioned hesed, loyalty, devotion. Okay? So her first act was to pledge to follow Naomi, her God, even to death. There is a great sacrifice. It's a loyal act, devotion, act of devotion. That was a great act of loyalty, devotion. But this was even greater. Okay? She was willing to marry an old man to restore Elimelech's family life. Only, to restore the Elimelech's family life. So she understood, what her mother-in-law meant. So she did not follow her own desire to remarry for her own benefit and well-being. She sacrificed herself for the sake of her family life. There is a self-sacrifice in love. So the Naomi, Boaz saw this act of faith as a self-sacrifice in love. Okay? That is maybe. Now is in chapter 4, you can find how did Boaz carry out his responsibility and how did God bless the Ruth. You can see it. Boaz was responsible toward God and Israel, toward the family of Naomi, and toward Ruth. He took action in response to Ruth's proposal. He acted in accordance with the God's law. Okay? Also, he Boaz was transparent, legally valid in all his actions, so that everyone could understand and accept and bless his action. So no one could raise an issue about it later. So this is why he just summoned all the elders and all the people of the town, and at the public place, he acted in accordance with the God's law. And then also he had witnesses, elders. Okay? So later, he announced then, verse 9, Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife. The purpose was to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. Then, this is very legally, he proceeded everything legally, so that all people can accept, understand, accept, and later they blessed his teaching. That means, transparent. Okay? So we can learn this honesty, transparency, and integrity as a man of God. When we want to do something, we should be transparent, honesty, and also we should act as a man of integrity. Okay, as a man of God. This is what we can learn from Boaz in chapter 4. Then how is the Boaz? Boaz was in a position of power in a society. The Ruth was very vulnerable. However, Boaz did not deal with a condescending attitude. Rather, he was a loving, generous, compassionate, kind, and understanding, and treated her like a princess. Wow, yes, maybe you can find something. He shows us how to use power and the privilege in a way that saves and blesses the needy. Okay? As we can learn from Boaz. Now is the last question 5, very important questions. In what respect is Boaz a type of Christ? So in chapter 2, we can see Boaz as a type of Christ in his character. Now, maybe we can see Boaz, a guardian redeemer, is a type of Christ. So in terms of redemption, maybe there is he can be a type of Christ. Okay? Does it make sense? Sleepy? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of redemption. So in chapter 2, in terms of character. So in terms of character, Boaz was a type of Christ. In chapter 3 and 4, in terms of redemption, he's the type of Christ. So we see, now is Ruth part. Okay.
So because Boaz redeemed Ruth, or because he redeemed the land, he saved Ruth and Naomi from poverty, and that's similar to how Christ redeemed people from sin. And also because Boaz redeemed Ruth, she could partake in God's work and be Christ's ancestor. And that's also similar to how when we were sinners, we could still be God's children.
Okay. Thank you. How about Abel Kim?
I'll read the two verses that are given. So Galatians 3:13. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. And Titus 2:14. Who gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself a people that are his very own, eager to do what is good. So I wrote down that Boaz took Ruth and Naomi into his own hands, whereas the other guardian redeemer was worried about his own estate and didn't want the responsibility of these two widows that came along with buying the land. But Boaz was willing to buy the land and hence take them as his own people. And not only that, but Boaz restores Naomi's life through Ruth's servantship. And so verse 15 reads, he will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth.
Okay, thank you. Now so let me share. This is the lady mentioned. Okay. So first we need to understand the why was Naomi in desperate of a guardian redeemer. So when Naomi's family moved to Moab, they gave up right to manage their property. It seems that someone else had taken it over. While she was in Moab, her husband and her 2 sons died. As a widow, she had no right to claim the property. So when she came back to Bethlehem, she could not move into a former residence and resume her family business. Everything to survive, she had to glean tears as one of the marginalized people. So her situation was quite desperate. Without the guardian redeemer, there's no way for her to restore her family name and the property. That's why she was in desperate guardian redeemer. Okay? The first guardian redeemer was unwilling to redeem Naomi's family when she found she would have to marry Ruth. He said, this would endanger my own estate. In what respect is a danger to his own estate? If he had a male heir by Ruth, he had a son by Ruth, the first son would be considered the heir of Elimelech, not his own. If there is a second son, he could be heir for the guardian redeemers. So if the problem is, if Ruth had only 1 son, the status of a guardian redeemer's own estate would become unclear. It was a risk. If only 1 son, in case, there's a risk. So on the contrary, Boaz first concern was Ruth, not the property. It's quite different. He was willing to redeem Naomi's family line by accepting Ruth as his wife. It meant that his own born through Ruth would be counted as Elimelech's and not his. first son. So in this respect, Boaz put his own family line at risk. His announcement tells us that his motive of redemption was very pure. So he said, already he announced in verse 10, his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. So not his own, and not his own son, his son. But this is, Boaz self-sacrifice. So we can say Ruth also self-sacrifice. Boaz also self-sacrifice. When a son was born to Boaz and Ruth, people recognized that Naomi had a son. It's not the son of Boaz. Naomi had a son. But the strange thing is, genealogy of 18 through 22, you look at, there's no name of Elimelech. Only the Boaz is the father of Obed, not Elimelech. It should be Elimelech, but the Boaz, father of Obed. That means, God blessed him to be included in the genealogy of David. So when Boaz sacrificed himself to redeem Elimelech's family line, God blessed him. God changed everything. Is it amazing?
Is there a restore? I feel like it's not a to be for the family line, it's for the inheritance, not for family line. Because they lost the inheritance from God. I mean, inheritance to be belong to their ancestor. So it should be only their own the clan. It should be inherited their own clan, but the Abimelech's portion will be in danger to belong to other clan, other. So I think it's not for the continuing the family line, but more likely for the keeping the God's inheritance. I think that's
Inheritance also, verse 10. Verse 10 is very clear. His name, his family line should be maintained, not just the property. Not only property, also his family, his name should be maintained. He announced, verse 10. Right? Also, people recognize that Naomi had a son. There is a Naomi's line. Right? So Ruth and the Boaz is just sacrifice themselves to maintain Elimelech's family line. Then, God blessed them actually.
I mean, according to the numbers, the voters, so those who inherit from voter among the voter who inherit the land from the ancestors, or must marry to the same same clan.
It's the same.
Yeah,
Family name, family line is. So our first line, Deuteronomy 25, 5 and 6 very clearly that the first son was considered as the that brother's name.
So anyway, they family line keep going, and then also, but anyway, the inheritance keep in the
Yeah, that's until 17. All people recognize Obed is the line of Elimelech. So Naomi had a son. And then also Boaz announced his name will not disappear from among his family.
Yeah.
And then 18 through 22 is the author's comment. So that's maybe the main point. So in the genealogy of Matthew chapter 1, also is the name is the same name. So God's redemptive maybe genealogy is different from the genealogy of ordinary maybe Israel. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Eh?
Anyway, the Boaz's son is considered as Boaz's son.
No. Actually, that's very clear, the first 10. It's the son, or Deuteronomy 25. Look at the Deuteronomy 25, 106.
But that's
First the son was considered as a dead brother's son. His name should be maintained. It's not Boaz's son. But the author's comment is Boaz's son. Okay.
So Elimelech's line and
Eh?
Elimelech's line and Boaz's line became one. So Elimelech's name is not mentioned anymore. But we know that Obed would be. We know Obed is was the offspring of Elimelech's line, but God put him into Boaz's line, right? So I think it's also God prophesied prophesied the Messiah would come out of Judah's line.
Is Elimelech also Judah?
He
It's
was
the
also,
same.
yeah. So yeah, but I think interesting is they met in one line. So two different.
One line, but Elimelech's
Yeah,
line, the voice is different.
Yeah, but they're
It,
different families, right?
Yeah, different
So
thing.
yeah, they became one. I
Yeah,
think.
they became one.
Yeah. One line, I mean.
One line. But not in the name of Elimelech, but
No.
in the name of
Yeah,
Boaz.
right.
That's
He
amazing.
became included, I
Right?
think. Yeah.
That's amazing. Actually.
That's great.
Okay. Now it's anyway. I realized that God blessed those who sacrificed themselves. It's Ruth also sacrificed herself. Boaz sacrificed himself to obey God's command, God's law. Then God blessed them. God used them in His redemptive work.
Amen.
That's very clear. This was, this was a treasure I found after a long meditation, long Bible study. It took 1 year. So I found the treasure, this treasure. Wow, this is amazing. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Maybe not now. So you can find it. So now is a Boaz type of a Messiah in terms of redemption. He became a grandfather of King David, a shadow of the Messiah. So Jesus is called the son of David. Okay? So as the Messiah, Jesus had all authority in heaven and on earth, but he did not use his authority to crush the weak people He used it to save people from the power of sin and death, to raise them as the children of God. He had a compassionate heart toward the sinners and was willing to sacrifice himself to save them. He did this publicly and in the way that God ordained, fully satisfying the requirements of the law. So as Boaz did everything according to the God's law. Okay? So as Boaz sacrificed himself to redeem Naomi's family line, so the Messiah gave up himself to redeem us from the curse of the law and our sins. The Galatians or Titus, it's very clear. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Christ gave himself for us to redeem us from all wickedness and to purify for himself people who are his own, very own, eager to do what is good. Okay? The Messiah, Jesus, redeems us from the power of Satan, sin and death, and makes us his pure and beloved bride, washing us by his precious blood. This is the gospel. Okay? So what can you learn about God? First, okay. Number 6. Fourteen. 소망, 정, control. Who can take this one? Number 6.
So,
14. Who is 14?
don't mind.
So in chapter 4 from verse 18, we read about David's ancestors and family line. So in the beginning, Ruth seemed like a very useless, poor and helpless woman, but even God used such a woman to become the ancestor from King David and so on. Next thing I learned about God, I'm not sure, but in chapter 3, verse 10 and 11, it's mentioned like when Ruth sat down, Boaz answered, "The Lord bless you, and don't be afraid," in verse 11. So when we can learn maybe that because Ruth ignored other young men and came to Boaz. So when we seek fellowship with God and ignore like worldly things, God will give us blessing and will comfort and encourage us, like in verse 11. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask.
Okay. Don't be afraid. Jesus said to us, don't be afraid. Okay. Good. Very good. Soma?
So I think we can learn the abundance of God's kindness. When we start at the beginning, you see there's death and there are two very poor, isolated, marginalized women. But when they put their faith in God's kindness and acted boldly in obedience, God ultimately restores them, and in the end there is life, there is fellowship, and there's love.
God's kindness.
Yeah.
That's very good. Control.
I learned 4 things about God. First, God uses people who have faith and obey God. So like Paul said about Ruth, but also Boaz had faith to obey the law and accept a woman of an enemy nation. And so they both had faith. So it was a marriage by faith.
Okay.
Moabite woman. So they were both included in the genealogy of Jesus. And also,
usually this, these days young people don't like that. That is by faith. But it's different.
yeah.
Okay.
And Ruth was compared to Rachel and Leah. Not compared, she was blessed to be like Rachel and Leah. And that's a high status for Moabite woman. So God used her and blessed her. Second thing I learned is that God works through the mentors of faith. Naomi was a mentor of faith, and God worked through her in Ruth's life. Third thing I learned was that God turns the bitter life into the life that praises the Lord. So in chapter 120 we can see that Naomi says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara." But in chapter 4 we see that other women were praising praising God through Naomi because of Ruth and because of her faith. So God turned her life from bitter life into the life that was praised by others and that was praising the Lord. And fourth thing was that God gives babies. Verse 13, the Lord enabled her to conceive. So it is the Lord who gives babies.
Are you ready to obey your mentor?
Amen.
Who's your mentor?
I have many. First, I think my parents.
Your parents. So you can obey to your parents.
I'll try my best.
I mean, in terms of marriage.
Oh.
Amen. Okay. I just ask, based on your answer. You cannot say it's horrible. It's not horrible.
No, it's not.
Terrible.
Oh, no, it's not terrible. No.
Yeah, not horrible. Okay. So I learned, I need to revise, based on your answers. I learned two things. God renews our lives. The 4:15a, He will renew your life, sustain you in your old age. So in chapter 1, Naomi's life was miserable. She lost everything. It seems that her life was over. But Ruth was a Moabite. She was also a young widow. She could have no hope of acceptance in Israel, not to mention having hope of marriage. But both of them, there's no hope. But it was not easy for Naomi and Ruth to make a decision of faith. But when they did so, God blessed them abundantly. There's in chapter 1, decision. Naomi decided to return to Bethlehem as a sincere repentance, expression of repentance toward God. Also, Ruth firmly decided to follow Naomi. So at the root of her decision is there's a God. That's maybe both of them, when they decided to follow God, God blessed them abundantly. As you can see, the fruit of their decision in chapter 4, right? So God works for the good of those who love Him, not those who hate Him, those who love Him. God renews those who hope in Him, those who have faith in Him. So in God, there's hope. So God is the source and the sustainer of life. Okay? That's one thing. Like Naomi, we were dead in our transgressions and sins. Like Ruth, we were foreigners to the covenant of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. But when we believed in Jesus, God made us alive and saved us from our sins. He changes our status to be beloved children members of his household, and heirs of his kingdom. In this way, God renews our lives.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Second, God uses those who live by faith. God uses those who live by faith, even poor widows and Gentiles. God does not show favoritism. God blesses anyone who comes to him by faith and uses them in his redemptive history. In the time of Judges, everyone did as they saw fit in their own eyes. It was a time of lawlessness and moral chaos. The book of Ruth focuses on a few people who live by faith in God during dark times. Even though times were dark, God worked through a few people who lived by faith in him and accomplished his great salvation plan. So in this way, God changes the course of history through a few people who lived by faith. Not many people, few people like Naomi and Ruth. Those who live by faith can be world changers. Okay? Because of God. Okay? God changes the course of history through a few people who live by faith. Those who live by faith can be world changers.
Amen.
Okay, let's read together this one. Ready?
God changes
The course of history through a few people who live by faith. Those who live by faith can be world changers. Heavenly Father, thank you that you are so great. That, anyone who come to you by faith, accept and use them greatly. Father, please help us to look at God, not look at the dark words, not look at myself or our circumstances, but look at God, who is a sovereign ruler, or renews our lives, uses us greatly in his redemptive history. Father, please help us to have a faith in you. Thank you in Jesus' name.
Amen.